Highbridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents A Sick Life. TLC and Me, Stories from On and Off the Stage. By Tionne T-Boz Watkins. Co-written by Emily Zellmer. Read by Tionne T-Boz Watkins. Dedication. I hope my words can be a rain of hope to anyone who needs them. Introduction. I believe everything in life happens for a reason. You are meant to be wherever you end up and whoever you become. I was meant to be Tionne T-Boz Watkins, a singer, dancer, philanthropist, creator, writer, daughter, mother, sister, and friend. I spent much of my life in TLC, the world's biggest selling American girl group of all time. I hear our songs like Waterfalls and Creep playing all the time. They're songs that people refer to as timeless and iconic, which is an amazing feeling. Together with Rosanda Chili Thomas and Lisa Left Eye Lopez, I created a legacy with TLC. We broke new ground and took down old barriers. We sold millions of albums and inspired millions of fans. TLC has been an essential aspect of my life, but it's only one part of it. Behind the scenes, I've experienced so much. I've dealt with a lifelong illness, sickle cell disease, and I've had dozens of health scares over the years. I gave birth to my daughter Chase against medical odds, and recently adopted my son named Chance. Both of them came into my life at very different times, and they both felt like miracles, which you'll hear all about later. I'm raising them as a single mother, just like my own mom. I've suffered tragedies and encountered the death of loved ones. I've become a strong, independent woman who refuses to back down. Over the years, I've learned that there's an upside to everything. You might think your story is the worst and that no one can relate, but there's always someone who's going through the same thing as you, if not worse. My story belongs to me, but I hope it can help those who read it. I hope that my ups and downs and my struggles will make you feel like you're not alone. If I can survive, I know others can too. I feel like all my hardships and all my pain have happened for a reason, whatever that reason is. Living with a scary disease has made me a fighter. It's taught me to push forward and look for the positive things in life. Maybe I've gone through all of this and learned these lessons so I could share them and make a difference. Maybe as you read this, my story can help you. Chapter 1. 2 stories, 1 life. When you perform, there's something that happens right before you go on stage. It's almost magical, like becoming an entirely other person. Before you step out in front of the crowd, you transform into someone else. So for much of my life, I've been 2 people. I have been myself, Tionne Watkins, a girl from Atlanta by way of Des Moines, with big dreams and a lifelong illness I've refused to let define me. But I've also been T-Boz, 1/3 of TLC, the world's biggest girl group. I've had dual stories, but they've both been a part of the same life. I have a routine I do when I transform into T-Boz. It's always the same. I look down, rock, pace the floor, and then get really quiet and tune everything out. When I look up, I'm T-Boz. It's an important center and process because music and dance are where I best express myself. It's where my ideals about the world and society and myself can be brought together to create something bigger. For me, music is everything. It makes you feel good through the positive experiences and the negative ones. And TLC's tracks have always been songs everyone can relate to in some way. When TLC formed in 1990, we had no idea our music would become so massive. Our second album, Crazy Sexy Cool, is one of only a few diamond certified albums in the U.S., selling over 10 million copies, and it was included on Rolling Stone's list of 500 greatest albums of all time. We won 5 Grammys out of 17 total nominations, and we earned 4 number 1 singles and 10 top 10 singles. We saw the sort of musical, commercial, and critical success that is rare for artists now, and I still marvel at how that was possible. During those decades, as TLC formed and grew and exploded into the world, I stayed T-Boz as much as possible when I was in the public eye. I never fully drew back the curtain or revealed what happened behind the scenes, especially on TV or in magazine interviews. I didn't want the press to know everything or to uncover too much of my personal life. I've always been genuine and open with our fans, of course, but I needed to keep some things to myself. If you see who I am on both sides of the coin, both as Tionne and T-Boz, you'll understand who I am and how I became a strong, independent woman who refuses to believe anything is impossible. Although T-Boz is an important part of me, I'm clear that I was born Tionne and I'll die Tionne. T-Boz is someone I created, like an alter ego, and I know how to leave her on stage when I go home, unlike some celebs. On April 26, 1970, I was born Tionne Tenise Watkins to James and Gail Watkins in Des Moines, Iowa. I came into the world with sickle cell disease, a genetic blood disorder, although my parents didn't know exactly what it was until later. I was sick from the moment I arrived, crying from pain and unable to voice what was ailing me. My dad left me and my mama when I was 3. He was a singer and a trumpet player and wanted to pursue his musical career in Florida, so my parents separated. I always wanted my father's love and attention, and for those first 3 years, we were really close. He took me to Smitty's Donuts, and his nickname for me was Little Vietnam because I used to run around like I was crazy. Once I got into the band's beer, drank some of it out of the can, ran around in circles, and then passed out. I always thought my dad was in Earth, Wind, and Fire because his band would play in our basement and sing, "Keep Your Head to the Sky." My mama raised me on her own, working as many jobs as necessary to give me the best life possible. She always told me I could be whatever I wanted to be, and she always stood by me when I was in pain. Both of my parents could sing, so I think music was in my blood from the beginning. Before they separated, they made an album together, but the record label ran off with the money. My mama's song was "I Don't Care No More," and my daddy's was "Baby Think It Over." Boy, could they sing, and as it turned out, I could too. What I wanted to be, as you'll come to see, was a performer. I was meant for the stage. Singing and dancing came naturally to me, and I loved the feeling of giving something back to the audience. Music can make you feel safe and connected, and it can give you a reason to keep going through any struggle or hardship. Every time I sing and dance, I know I am helping someone. I help them feel less alone. I know this because I have felt alone. I have been consumed with the sense that I'm struggling solo, that no one else seems to understand the pain or challenges I faced. But the truth is that we all go through bad times, just as we all go through good ones. None of us are alone in that. While my fans may not share my exact struggles, and some may not deal with the serious illness like sickle cell disease, I believe there's something everyone can take away from my story. There are different levels of pain, but pain is pain, even though we all handle it differently. It can hurt no matter where it comes from. But if you have a positive attitude and you embrace your own strength, it can help you get past the pain or learn how to cope with it. My story is very much linked to sickle cell disease, an incurable blood disorder. The disease, sometimes known as SCD, is hereditary, passed from parents to children in their genes. If a child is born with sickle cell, it means that they've inherited 2 abnormal hemoglobin genes, one from each parent. It's not something you can catch or develop later in life. It's with you from the moment you come into existence. Sickle cell disease changes the shape of your red blood cells. Instead of being round like normal red blood cells, SCD cells are curved into a crescent shape, hence the term sickle, and can't hold on to oxygen the right way. Because of this, the cells can't get where they need to go. So you can have a stroke, suffer organ failure, or die. It's the sort of thing some people have heard about, but no one ever really seems to quite know what it is. Although you may not be that familiar with it, sickle cell disease is not uncommon. In fact, it is the most common genetic disorder in the U.S. About 100,000 Americans are thought to be living with sickle cell disease, and each year, another 1,000 babies are born with it. The majority of patients are Black, about 60 to 80% in total, but it can affect other races, including people of Indian and Middle Eastern descent. There are 3 main types of sickle cell disease: sickle cell anemia, SC, and SS. Each of these can also be mixed with other blood disorders such as beta thalassemia, which creates variations on each. The one people usually have heard of is sickle cell anemia. Mine is a very specific type called sickle thal with arthritis, which is sickle cell type SC mixed with arthritis and beta thalassemia, a blood disorder that reduces the production of hemoglobin, the protein in red blood cells that carries oxygen. I didn't receive a correct diagnosis until I was 28 years old, which has always caused problems because doctors have never known how to help me. When you have sickle cell, your red blood cells get stuck on their way around your veins, causing blockages and stopping the oxygen from getting to your vital organs. Where there's a lack of oxygen, you can go into a crisis, an attack of severe pain, sometimes located only in a certain spot and sometimes all over your body. Often, it's hard to breathe or walk or even do something as basic as holding a pen. A crisis can happen without any warning. Just bam, you're in the hospital again. If you go swimming, get on a plane, get caught in the rain, or experience a change in climate, you could fall ill. Even if I get really emotional or stressed out, a crisis can come on. Drinking alcohol thins your blood, as does flying on a plane. So that's a no too. You don't always have to go to the hospital for a crisis, but if you can't get it under control at home right away, it usually lands you in the hospital bed. And of course, I picked a career that is a real no-no for sickle cell patients because I'm always active, always traveling, and always on planes and in different climates. Sickle cell disease currently does not have a cure, although they have found ways of curing unborn children and, in some rare cases, patients under the age of 40. That's the general cutoff because trying to cure someone as they get older, in most cases, can do more harm than good. That means there's no cure for me, at least right now. It's a lifelong disease and you have to manage it every single day. It's a learning process too. What can your body handle? What's the breaking point? Each new experience, each new day, and you're always trying to figure out more because your body changes over time. And you'd be surprised how much doctors don't know and don't help. And honestly, some just don't care. You'd think I'd have it all figured out by now. But if I'm telling the truth, it's incredibly hard to live with this disease. It's incredibly hard to live with any disease. With sickle cell, you don't always know when a crisis is coming. One can arise at any time, in any place, totally debilitating you. Some days I wake up consumed by pain, which seems to manifest itself slightly differently each time. It's like knives stabbing me over and over again in my joints. The invisible knives leave no place untouched except my fingers and toes. It's impossible to function like that. Sometimes I can't even hold a glass of water. Usually, when I'm in a lot of pain, I can't walk. It hurts to lie down, but it hurts to sit up. Every breath I take throbs, and each gasp of air comes in with a sharp twinge. I used to hate for my mom to carry me to the bathroom when I was sick as a kid, so I'd crawl there on all fours no matter how much it hurt or how long it took. I was stubborn that way. When you're strong and you have a high tolerance for pain like me, and you don't always act sick, you can go to the hospital in a crisis, and sometimes the nurses will say, "Well, it doesn't look like anything's wrong." They don't always want to help you if you're not screaming and crying and acting a fool. But my mom taught me to calm down. When you scream or move around or get agitated, the pain gets worse. So if you mentally try to stabilize yourself, it can help. Sometimes people think I have a hard exterior or that I'm putting on a face, but it's not like that. When you have something so debilitating and so painful, you train yourself to stand strong and not complain and not look for any pity. Maybe you can't fathom what it's like to feel the things that I felt, and that's been true of some people around me a lot. But I bet you can imagine why strength through anything tough is so important. It's especially important if you have kids and they're in the hospital with you. You don't want your kids to know you think you might die. And there were some instances where I really could have died. I don't want my daughter or my son to feel my pain. I felt like I'm dying inside. And I've had to keep a normal face on. It's a double-edged sword because I am afraid and I do need support, but I also understand that my own strength is essential, both for me and for those around me. It can be especially scary because, as I've learned, a lot of doctors don't know much about it. That's true about most doctors when it comes to a lot of things, but they don't want to admit it because it's their job to know. Medicine is technically a science, but I found much of it is actually guesswork. They'll stick a needle in you or give you a drug even if they're not sure what it's going to do. They'll treat the symptoms, not the cause. I've been very mistreated in hospitals over the years. A good doctor looks at the whole person, not just the disease. They learn your name and they ask how you're doing and find out your medical history. Good nurses do the same. They show kindness and they treat you like a person, not an object. But when you've spent as much time as I have in a hospital bed, you learn that some doctors and some nurses are not caring at all. When I was a child during one particular hospital stay, I remember feeling really sick and not wanting to eat. My mama left to go to the lobby for 10 minutes, and the nurse took it upon herself to force feed me. She stood over me, a bite of liver in her hand. No, I shook my head. No, thank you. Instead of listening to me, she pressed my mouth open and shoved the food into my throat. When my mom returned, she was furious. The nurse was fired for it, and to this day, I can't stand liver. I was turned from a patient into a guinea pig, especially when I was young. Doctors gave me all sorts of conflicting drugs, and I've been given drugs that constipate me and then drugs that act as a laxative. They've given me drugs that have made me break out, throw up, scratch my skin uncontrollably, and hallucinate. Some almost stopped my heart. They loaded me with really powerful painkillers, which has been a nightmare. It's put my body through so much. Sometimes I feel like the medication has done more harm than good. There are 3 types of medication that work best for sickle cell to contain the pain. The strongest are Demerol, Dilaudid, and morphine. They administer them through a pump in your IV, usually every 15 minutes in little spurts, or through your actual IV every 4 to 6 hours. I itch on all 3 of them because my body rejects pain medicine. Dilaudid has made me puke so hard that one of my ribs cracked, and it has almost stopped my heart and almost killed me, so it's not an option. I'm allergic to morphine, which makes it pretty miserable. I see rats every time I take it. So they switched me over to Demerol, but after Michael Jackson died, that was taken off the market. It's a really dangerous drug. It's given people seizures and halted their heart from beating. So now I'm back on morphine when I'm in the hospital, and I have to deal with all the crazy side effects. The doctors give me Benadryl and something for my stomach so I won't puke before taking the morphine. It's a rock and a hard place. The pain from the disease, or the misery of the drugs that are supposed to help you. Because I've been given so many drugs in the hospital and had so many IVs, my veins are pretty burnt out. The worst part is when they take you off the medication because you go through withdrawal. It's important to wind down slowly, so they lower the dosage gradually. You have to deal with hot and cold flashes, shaking, crazy dreams, bad nerves. It's the worst. Your body has to sweat out all the super strong drugs you didn't even want in the first place. It can be really traumatic, even though you get used to the process. I have all this knowledge now, but no one knew anything in the 70s when I was growing up, or in the 80s or the 90s for that matter. When I was a baby, I cried all the time. No one could figure out why, and there wasn't a lot of research available on genetic disorders like sickle cell back then. But my mom knew something wasn't right. My early years were spent packing and unpacking a suitcase to go to the hospital in Des Moines. Even though we didn't understand what my disease was yet, we got to know the signs of the sickness coming on. The pain would weave through my limbs, and I'd cry and cry. Sometimes I'd get delirious and not know where I was. Other times, my face would swell up really badly, and I'd get super pale with pink lips and dark circles under my eyes. My mom was there by my side the whole time, comforting me and holding my hand. She used to sing a melody using my name to calm me down. I know a girl, a pretty little girl, oh Tionne, Denise, my mama would croon. And it helped. She took me to get a special treat on the way to the hospital every time. Sometimes we went for sugar biscuits at Mustard's, or to Smitty's Donuts, or to Tasty Tacos. The food would make me forget about the pain and the fear. And for a few moments, the tears would ebb. There were a lot of things that would bring on a crisis when I was a kid. By trial and error, my mom figured out some of them. Too much heat dehydrated me, and too much cold made me achy and my bones hold on to the low temperature. Swimming in a chilly pool or the ocean, drinking milk, playing in the snow, or getting something out of the freezer could all trigger a crisis. Stress, exhaustion, and fighting all messed me up too. It felt like anything and everything could be a trigger. In 1977, after years of illness and uncertainty, my mom took me back to Mercy Hospital in Des Moines. An Indian doctor, whose name I don't remember, did a few tests. They'd been testing me since I was born, trying to figure out why I was always getting sick. But this time, the doctor claimed to have found the reason. She has sickle cell anemia and allergic arthritis, he told my mom while I sat on the table. It's serious. What does that mean, my mom asked. I leaned forward. I wanted to know too. Maybe he could get rid of my pain. She won't live past 30, he explained bluntly. She can't ever have children. She's going to be disabled her entire life. I was only 7 years old, but I wasn't too young to understand what he was saying. I looked around the room, staring at my mom and this doctor. Who was he talking about? This wasn't my story. I was going to be a famous performer. He was clearly mistaken. My mom saw my confusion. She put her hand on my arm and lowered herself to look into my eyes. Don't worry, honey, she said confidently. God has the last say-so in your life. That guy was the first doctor to be totally wrong, but certainly not the last. I knew better than to believe him, though. I was meant for something much bigger, much greater. I wasn't going to be the victim of a disease he didn't seem to know much about. I was going to be a star, and no illness was going to get in my way. Having this disease doesn't have to be a death sentence, although you can die from it. It doesn't mean your life can't be well-lived and happy. I'm proof of that. Ever since I came clean to the public that I have sickle cell disease in the mid-90s, I've worked really hard to be an outspoken advocate for other sick people, especially kids. Doctors and medicine have come a long way since I was born, but there are still misconceptions about sickle cell. It's not always an easy life, although some people on the outside may think so because I have a strong persona. But it's possible to face those hard times head on and survive. This takes me to the other half of my story, which involves a very different version of the word sick. In TLC, I saw things and went places that most people can only dream of. TLC has released 4 albums since we formed in Atlanta, and we spent 2016 and 2017 making our 5th. We've had major successes and major struggles. There's been birth, death, bankruptcy, feuds, and, most important, relatable songs and timeless music. So many times I've heard our song, Waterfalls, being played in a store or on a TV show or from a car window while driving down the street or standing in the elevator. As I was suffering from the pain of sickle cell disease and as I was grappling to figure out how to live with it, I didn't feel like I had to be defined by my illness. I'm a performer first, and I just happen to have a lifelong problem to deal with. Some of the most important moments of my life have arrived because of TLC. Here are some examples of that. The 2 people who had the most musical influence on me were Michael Jackson and Prince. Throughout our career, I met both, which was seriously insane. I can still barely believe it. I even got to work with Michael Jackson when TLC performed at 2 of his Heal the World benefit shows, which was a dream come true. In 2000, TLC performed at Madison Square Garden, the holy grail of venues. It was sold out, which is a really big deal. During the show, we launched into our single, No Scrubs. Suddenly, through the speakers came this twang of a guitar. It wasn't one of our band's guitars, but something about it sounded familiar. I turned around and it was Prince. I'd met him before that night, but I never imagined he'd come on stage with us. The reverberation of his guitar strings echoed around me and out into the crowd, urging a cheer from the audience, who were just as surprised as we were. In that moment, I almost stopped singing. All I could think was, this is not happening to me. I forgot for a moment that I was T-Boz. I temporarily lost the knowledge that I was supposed to be a celebrity too. I went into fan mode. I wasn't Tionne on this stage, so I couldn't get starstruck. I had to consciously breathe and remind myself to keep singing. I had to silently tell myself to get it together. And even though he was on stage with all of us, I felt like he was there just with me. At the end of the song, Prince just vanished. We kept performing. We didn't even get a chance to speak to him after the show. He arrived and then disappeared like a magician, fading in and out of the room. As you'll see, the journey of TLC is an incredible one. I believe everything happens for a reason, and it seems like a lot of things lined up for us to become what we became. There are stories of rebellion, of delight, of triumph. We set out to be trendsetters, and we did just that. We've toured the world, playing on massive stages in huge rooms to crowds of thousands. We've won awards and become a household name. Our fans from the 90s have had children and brought those children to our recent shows, making us a band for multiple generations. We were able to do it because we worked hard, cared a lot, and believed it was possible. The music industry can be hard too. TLC learned that early on. We lost a lot of money. The music business is exactly that, a business. You get to make meaningful art, but at the end of the day, it's all about the bottom line. I signed my name to a contract at 19 years old that I was stuck to for years against my will. I was subservient to what other people thought was best for me and for TLC. People in this industry want to exploit you and exploit your talent, and you have to learn not to let them. I almost threw in the towel on music more than once. TLC had great successes, but we also had some failures too. And worst of all, we lost one of our own, a tragedy that lingers with me to this day. I'm a person who is afflicted with disease. Sickle cell hasn't been the only health scare I've dealt with. But the slang version of the word sick means something else, awesome or excellent. My life, as hard as some of it has been incredible. I wouldn't trade it for the world. So to say I've had a sick life is twofold. I've been in and out of the hospitals, but my life has also been awesome. I have these two stories converging into one, where sometimes I'm Tionne and sometimes I'm T-Boz. But the truth is that both of these women are the same person. We're both mothers, daughters, sisters, friends, artists, and survivors. We both know that it takes hard work to succeed and that giving up is never an option. We also both know that after the darkness, there is always light. It can be hard to see in the moment when you feel trapped and blinded, but it's there, waiting to shine. You have to have faith that the light will come. When I'm sick, I always take myself to a peaceful place. I love water, so I imagine a cave of 3 waterfalls and a stream that takes you to a beautiful beach. It's calm and quiet, and it helps me remember that everything will be okay. I was given a death sentence of 30 years old. I lived past it. I was given another death sentence by another doctor of 45 years old. I lived past that one too. I was never supposed to have children, and my daughter Chase is now a teenager. I recently adopted my son from birth named Chance. I was told I would be disabled my whole entire life, but I still get on stage and I perform my heart out every month. So no one can tell you what you're going to be. Only you and God know your path. And like my mama said, He has the last say-so. What makes you keep going when your body continually fails you? Why do you stand up again and again and keep trying to survive? For myself, it's for many reasons. For love, for my daughter, for my son, for my family, for music, for the fans. I've always kept standing back up, no matter what obstacle was placed in front of me, because that's the only thing you can do. And if I can do that after all these years, anyone can. The truth is that anything you really want in life is never easy, but it's worth it. When I was first starting out as a performer before TLC blew up, I was working on my dance moves with my friend Divine Stevens, who is a choreographer. Tionne, he asked, do you know what a true choreographer is? No, I said. What is it? It's not a person who learns a dance and teaches it to another, he told me. It's a person who creates the dance and makes the world follow. Well, that's what I'm going to be, I confirmed. And I thought about it. I wanted to be a true choreographer, someone who could create and make the world follow. When you're an artist, you want to be a trendsetter, or at least the best artists do. I wanted to be successful like Michael Jackson or Prince, but still be known for being myself. I always want to reach for the top in everything I do, whether it's writing new music or creating a music video or even writing a book. I embraced that ideal throughout TLC's career. I created the dances for some of our biggest hits like Waterfalls, What About Your Friends, and Creep. They became iconic. And like Divine said, I got to watch the world do those dances. He really helped me with my confidence as a performer and as a dancer. And I saw the proof of my work linger with our fans. When I was born, anything was possible. The world was limitless. But I struck out on my own path and chose my own way. I was wholly myself throughout all of it. I may not have always shared my stories with the public or opened the curtain completely, but I've never deviated from who I am as both Tionne and as T-Boz. That is the key. You should always be who you are. Just because none of the girls are wearing baggy pants and dancing with the guys doesn't mean you can't. Just because the music industry expects women to sex themselves up to sell music doesn't mean you have to. Just because the doctors tell you that you'll die doesn't mean you will. You get to choreograph your own life. And if you do that, if you make the moves your way, the world will follow. Chapter 2. The MTB Thing. TLC has a saying. If something feels right, like it's destined for you, it's an MTB thing. It means meant to be. It's something you say about an inevitability or about fate. Throughout my life, since I was a kid, I've been prone to premonitions. Sometimes I feel when things are going to happen. I certainly can't predict everything, but often, in your gut, you know when it's MTB. For me, performing was one of those things. I was born to sing and dance, and there was never going to be another path for me. That became clearer and clearer as I grew up, even if I wasn't always certain exactly what that life would look like. The first time I went on stage, I was 7. My mom entered me in a pageant called Little Miss Black Des Moines. I was a black kid growing up in a predominantly white neighborhood in Iowa. We lived in a medium-sized house that my mama still owns today. I was a natural performer, always dancing and trying to play some instrument, and this was going to be my grand entrance. They thought it would be good for me to perform a skit for the pageant, but I refused to rehearse in front of anyone, even my mama. She had a friend who was an acting coach and helped me, and I practiced a lot. I was a little skeptical about doing a pageant and I felt nervous, but still I wanted to win. The funny thing is that I will dance and sing in front of anyone, but speaking before a crowd is hard for me. I don't like people staring, which is true to this day. The pageant was held every year, and this year's program had a cartoon sketch of a little black Shirley Temple girl with curly hair on the cover. I don't think I really wanted to do it, but I had committed and wanted to keep my word. I also really did want to win. I wore a beanie hat just like Rerun on What's Happening, and I went on stage and did my little skit. As I look back now, it seems strange that I didn't sing or dance. But it was my first time performing for a big audience, and I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to be yet. I love being in the spotlight, all the parents watching me and clapping. I was a star, if only for a few minutes. I didn't win. The girl who got first place played an instrument. I can't remember which one. The judges sat on the side of the stage, so they couldn't see how her legs were cocked open the whole time she played. Everyone in the crowd could see her panties. So she beat me, and I came in second place. But I know if they had seen her underwear, I would have come in first. I knew from then on that I wanted to be a performer. I sang at the Maple Street Baptist Church every weekend with my mama. She was like the Patti LaBelle of the church, the big kahuna. I always looked up to her. Her song was I'm Going Over Yonder, and mine was Sinner, You're Gonna Be Sorry. Since my mom was the main star, everyone called me Little Gail. Everyone would urge me to sing, saying, "Go ahead, Little Gail." But I wanted to be myself. I would think to myself, stop calling me my mama's name. I am not my mama. I'm about to be on TV. I'm about to blow up. I was Tionne, not Little Gail. And don't get me wrong, I looked up to my mama. Like any little girl, I wanted to be just like her. But I still knew I wanted to make a name for myself. I didn't perform outside of the church when I was younger, but I wanted to learn new things. I want to do this, I'd tell my mama about something, and then a few days later, I don't want to do it anymore. But she let me try it all so I could figure out what I liked. I tried Taekwondo, but after the second day, that was it for me. I didn't like it. Then my mama paid for me to take 2 weeks of piano classes. After those 2 weeks, I announced, I don't think this is what I want to do either. She said, Tionne, nobody has time to pay for you to start something you don't finish. I assured her that if I took up dance class, I would not quit. So when I was 12, she found a program at the local rec center and enrolled me. I breezed through those classes like jazz and modern dance. They kept moving me up to more advanced classes. Within a few weeks, they put me in the adult intermediate class and offered to let me perform in this big show. I danced to Wade in the Water, clad in this African outfit and no shoes. Just me, one other kid, and a bunch of adults. After that, there was nowhere to advance up to. I was done with the dance classes. I started realizing that I might have real talent. That kind of praise helped me understand that I had something special. I didn't know I could dance as well as I did because usually it was my cousin saying, "Ask Tionne, she can dance." I loved Michael Jackson, so I practiced the moves to Billie Jean every single day religiously. I worked on those moves way harder than I worked on homework. We had this mirrored table in our basement, and I used it to put on Prince concerts for my friends after school. They were crazy enough to actually sit there and watch me. Dancing for me felt easy and natural. My mom can dance, so I don't get it from nowhere. I think maybe it came in my DNA. I learned a lot from my mama. She taught me how to hustle. We lived in a big house on a nice street, but sometimes we were broke. We sold whatever t-shirts were currently popular on the street corner and at swap meets, and dug through the couch cushions for change when we needed money. I don't know where the shirts came from, but I think my mama bought them in bulk. We even sold car wax and necklace charms dipped in gold leaf. Sometimes we ate watermelon and popcorn for dinner. But my clothes were always nice and they were always clean. I was taught to present myself well no matter the circumstances. It was important that I had my mom because my dad was inconsistent and a habitual liar. He was a musician when I was a kid, and now he's a pastor of sorts. I like to joke and call him Reverend Do-Wrong. When I was a kid, my parents' marriage started to break apart. My dad never kept his promises. When I was 5, he called on Christmas Eve and said, "Hey, T-Booger, come wait by the window and I'll bring your gifts." I sat by that window all night long and he didn't come. When my mom tried to put me to bed, I screamed, "No, my daddy is coming." I finally fell asleep on the couch. I woke up in my bed on Christmas morning, and my mom made sure I had the best Christmas without him. She moved out all the living room furniture and got me a little merry-go-round and a big toy roller coaster you could ride on. It took my mind off my dad for a little while. My father was a bigamist and cheated on my mom when they were still together. My mom found out later that he didn't show that Christmas because he was getting married to someone else. So I don't know why he told me to wait for him by that window. When I was growing up, my mama didn't believe in running men in and out of the house. She raised me to be a strong, independent woman. Men could come second or not at all. She knew not to rely on anyone else but herself, especially after how badly my daddy treated her. My mama did everything herself. "Tionne," she'd tell me, "it's your job to make sure your kids are protected. It's your job to make sure a child is straight. Remember that when you grow up and start a family." I saw my dad off and on as I was growing up. He was in a band and they toured around a lot. He was out in the world spreading his love, if you know what I mean. When I was really young, before my parents broke up, he asked my cousin Ronnie, who was 17, to come along to Florida with his band. "Don't go," I begged Ronnie. I felt like something bad was going to happen. "I have a feeling. Don't leave." But he went. A week later, we found out that my dad's bandmate Delbert had murdered Ronnie. He stabbed him in the chest with a butcher knife in a dispute over some money. It was my first real brush with death. It hit me really hard. Because my dad was never around, Ronnie felt like the man in my life. He was the only grown-up big guy I knew. He played with me and we'd watch TV together. I was furious that my dad took him away from me. It didn't make sense. I didn't understand why I kept losing all the significant men in my life. I was so sad. And I was still young, so death was harder to wrap my head around. I knew about death, but I hadn't known it would feel so permanent. Ronnie was just gone. To this day, my biggest pet peeve is someone not keeping their word. It always reminds me of my father. If you tell me one lie, I'll never trust you again. My issues with my dad lingered a little heavier after that. I didn't feel like he had my back. He let his girlfriend, who later became his wife, and who we will call Bertilda, abuse me and barely noticed. I think some women have an issue with the other woman's child, so I was a problem for her to begin with. Bertilda would knock my food on the floor at McDonald's and would bat my hand away if I wanted to grab my dad's hand or just take his hand if I was already holding it. And he'd do nothing. She braided my hair too tight, which you can't do because it gives you bumps, and it's really painful. You can lose your hair from too much tension. One night, while I was visiting them in Florida, she tried to force me into a scalding hot bath that would have hurt my skin. I ran out and called my mom and said, "Bertilda is trying to burn me." My mom hung up, grabbed her purse, and drove straight to the airport. It felt like only minutes had passed when I heard the door fly open, hinges creaking. "Where the fuck's she at?" my mama hollered. She packed up my stuff and we went home. My dad hid Bertilda, which was probably for the best. Another time, my mom and I flew to Florida, and my dad was supposed to come meet us at the airport. He never showed up. He hadn't seen me in a while, but he couldn't be bothered to come. I had to talk to a psychiatrist after that happened. I started poking my doll's eyes out because I was so mad that he left us at the airport. Dads can make or break you as a kid. My issues with him have continued throughout my life. When I first met my dad's second wife, we'll call her Hilda, I reached my hand out in greeting, and she folded her arms as if I was diseased. She simply said with spite, "Where's the bathroom?" I thought to myself, oh boy, here we go again. Hilda tried to entice two of my boyfriends and later my husband by showing them her panties. She tried to invite herself on my husband's tour bus by telling him she gave good head. I've never been trying to live out a real-life Jerry Springer episode, but my dad has made that difficult. My mom did her best during all this drama with my dad. She stood by me and gave me endless amounts of love. But no matter what, she couldn't pay me to believe my dad loved me. She worried because I was constantly sick and she didn't always know how to help me. I'm sure it must have been awful to see me in pain. She held my hand and smiled and sang as we dealt with health scare after health scare. I only saw my dad in the hospital when my parents were still together. Once they broke up, I didn't get any more visits from him for the rest of my childhood. I guess it was because he lived out of state. In my adult years, I remember some visits, if he happened to be in town, but I can't recall him ever flying out to see me when I was sick. I want to be clear about something. I don't dislike my dad. The Bible says, "Love thy father," and that's important. Even though I felt like he wronged me early on, I still love him. Today, we're trying to build a better relationship, and we speak from time to time, mostly through text messaging. I know now that having issues with my dad is where a lot of my anger came from early on in my life. I was mad that he used to lie to me, and it turned out that the world wasn't this perfect little place I thought it should be. I wanted things to be different, so I was mad about that a lot. I finally figured out that all of these issues with my dad also resulted in me choosing the wrong man. I was looking for the protective vibe that he didn't give me. Your dad is supposed to protect you, but for me, it was always my mom instead. I didn't look as closely at men as I should have. I just looked at whether they could protect me. I didn't bother to consider the intricate details that build a relationship. I made the wrong choices. That was a real life lesson. When I think about my dad, I realize how far I've come since those early years. Here's what I know now about anger. No matter who the person is or the situation, you only hurt yourself more if you hold a grudge. It's not healthy. That person just continues on with their life, and you're the one who's hurt and left behind damaging yourself. They won't change, so you have to learn to just get over it. Let it go and learn to heal. Don't get stuck in the past. My dad has changed some, but he's never admitted to some of his lies. My anger didn't change anything for me. I know that now. It actually made a lot of things worse. But back then, as my health became more and more of an issue, I always had my mom by my side. I've said it before and I'll say it again. My mom was the best possible example of a parent. She showed me enough love for both of them, especially when I was sick. It was always a learning process on how to deal with the illness. It was scary to discover as a young child that I was different, that I had to grapple with something other people didn't. I couldn't go swimming. Other kids could have ice cream and I wasn't allowed to have cow's milk. I drank baby formula for a long time because it was the only option besides actual milk, and I got teased for it. I was in and out of the hospital a lot. I knew doctors and nurses by name. Once I was in the newspaper because I spent so much time in the children's wing. The fact that I was sick was a part of my reality. But as time passed, regardless of how ill I felt, it became something of a second nature. Mostly, I was more interested in singing and dancing than I was in worrying about my health. We moved around somewhat when I was young, trying to find a place to call home. My mom was a get up and go kind of woman, and she didn't have my dad to tie her down. So if she wanted to do something, she did it. She grew tired of the Midwest, and I think the South seemed like an awesome place for her. Her first choice was Houston, although I'm not entirely sure why. She closed the Montessori school she owned, and we headed south, renting out our house in Des Moines. We lived there for 9 months in a 2-bedroom apartment that felt so much smaller to me than our 3-story house in Des Moines. And those months were filled with bad luck. It was not MTV. Mom worked 3 jobs in preparation for the move to Houston. She hired a moving company to haul all of our stuff from Des Moines to Houston, and I watched them load it all into a trailer and drive away. 2 days later, the phone rang. The truck had been vandalized and burned by the movers on the way to Houston. My mama hustled me into the car and drove in a fury to see what was left. When we arrived, finally, the trailer and everything left in it was a smoldering mess. Although nothing was left, the movers had taken most of our lives with them. The TV, the stereo, the nicest pieces of furniture, and all our pictures and memories. And then, apparently, they lit the rest on fire. I stood there, next to my mama, and stared at the ashes. All we had left were some suitcases of clothes in the trunk of our car. There was a sad look on my mom's face, and I didn't know how to comfort her. But we knew we had to start again and that we had each other. My mom did her best to fill our new apartment and to make me feel like it was home. I felt like a happy, normal kid most of the time. I liked everything about Houston except for the time I was chased by a big, scary German Shepherd. I had a bad history with dogs that started with my dad's dog Kipper, who bit my right eye, lip, and stomach. Thanks to him, I've always had a fear of dogs. And I'll admit, I had another childhood phobia I developed when I stayed at my friend's house in the projects. I love eating Raisin Bran just like my mama ate, and my friend's parents told me to make myself at home. I climbed on the counter to get a bowl, and my knee knocked over the cereal box. Raisins ran everywhere, and they kept running. It turned out they weren't raisins, and they were roaches. So to this day, I can't have raisins. In Houston, the bad luck continued. Soon after we settled in, someone hit our little Volkswagen and totaled it, so we had no furniture and no car. I kept getting sick, too. My illness would flare up, and I'd feel tired or achy, and I'd go to the hospital. It was a stressful time. It got worse. My mom used to help out this young guy named Vincent, who she was really kind to. We met him in Houston, and she took to him and always did good by him. My mama had a habit of taking in strays, and that's what she did with him. One day, she put me in a car and drove me over to an apartment. "Stay here," she told me. I watched through the window as she marched up the stairs, dragged Vincent out of the apartment, and back down the stairs and beat his ass. She got back in the car. "What did he do?" I asked. "He stole your college money," she replied. "I've been saving Susan B. Anthony coins since you were born, and he used the money to buy drugs. It's gone." After that, my mom had enough of Houston. She was worried about my safety because a 3-year-old little kid had her throat slit just around the corner from our apartment. One day, when she was a few minutes late picking me up from school, my mama arrived to find a man trying to lure me into his car. Another time we came home and found a maintenance man walking out of our house. That was the end of Texas for us. We spent 6 months in California after that so my mama could take care of my Aunt Wanda after her surgery. And then, when I was 9, it was decided that we'd move to Atlanta. My mama didn't know anyone there, but she said it seemed like the right place to start over. I think she was inspired by the Gladys Knight and the Pips song, "Midnight Train to Georgia." She used to sing it all the time. When we arrived, we still didn't have a lot of furniture. Our first apartment there in Union City was filled with boxes. For Thanksgiving, my mama, her best friend Una Mae, and Una Mae's daughter Tay, who I consider my aunt and cousin, covered some of the boxes with a cloth and served dinner on it like a table. It felt like home suddenly. I started to feel like I belonged there. Having Una and Tay there helped a lot. I missed Iowa. I'd been dragged out of Des Moines, kicking and screaming at first, but I felt a connection to Atlanta. I liked the vibe and the music. Everything felt new and current. The weather, which was so much warmer and temperate than the Midwest, was somewhat better for my health. My body reacts badly to the cold, and I always ached when we were in Des Moines. Of course, sometimes it is bad for me to get hot too, because I get sick or dehydrated, but it was better overall. I felt good and things felt exciting. After 3 years in Atlanta, we moved back to Des Moines. It felt like a blessing and a curse to me. My mama got pregnant, and she wanted us to move in with my grandma, Velma, so she could have some help and so my brother could be born in Iowa like me. We packed up again and headed back to the Midwest. I didn't realize I'd be so jealous when Coco came home from the hospital. His real name is Kanoy, but we call him Coco as a child. He is now called K.O. Everyone kept coming over to the house and fawning over him. I didn't like sharing the attention. "Mama," I said one day, "when is Coco going back?" "What do you mean?" she asked. "When's he going back to the hospital?" I said. "He's not," she said. "He's here to stay." So I had to come around to him even if I didn't like it at first. And soon enough, I loved him, and I was proud to be his sister. My mama thought it was important for me to know how to cook. When I was 12, she taught me to prepare full-course meals, and I'd make dinner while she was working at UPS. She worked long hours, so I was responsible for making Coco dinner and helping him with his homework while he was growing up. I felt like his second mom, and our connection got closer and closer over the years. Now we have companies and work in the music industry together. He produced a lot on our latest album. In Des Moines, I love living with my grandma. I admire her so much. She was so sweet and wise. I loved going with her to the Native American powwows to learn about our heritage. She took me to see the Commodores, my first concert ever. In the afternoon, she watched soap operas, The Young and the Restless, As the World Turns, Guiding Light, and every day I sat right beside her. We gossiped during the commercial breaks, and she'd explain what was going on in the soaps. She knew every detail of the characters and the plot. She loved black coffee, which I didn't understand. She made me a special milk drink out of Coffee Mate creamer since I couldn't have milk. My mom always planned to move back to Atlanta after having Coco, so we didn't stay in Des Moines permanently. She went to Atlanta to find us a new place to live and look for a job, leaving me with my grandma, which obviously was something I was very into. I lived with Grandma for a month, and every morning she'd get up and make me a big breakfast. I always helped her clean up the kitchen afterward. We didn't always agree on food, though. "Tionne," she said one day, "try this." It was a peanut butter jelly and banana sandwich. Ew! But I loved my grandma, so I took a small, tentative bite. It was so mushy, the ingredients didn't belong together at all. "Grandma," I said, still chewing, "sorry, but that is nasty. I don't know how you eat it." "Tionne, food is not nasty," she replied. She was very serious. She felt that parents worked hard to feed their kids, so you should eat everything you were given and be thankful. My family was really important to me when I was growing up, and they still are. I spent a lot of time with my cousins and my Aunt Ressie, Velva, and Wanda. My Uncle Quentin and I were close when I was younger, but I was especially close with my Uncle Victor. He's the reason I have a complex about feet. He had these crusty feet, and he would hold me down and rub his feet on my face. The dry skin would roll down my cheek. Ugh. He told me, "You have to learn how to get out from under my hold." I learned how to wiggle out from under people's legs and put them in a chokehold. I have a lifelong complex about feet thanks to him. But I also learned how to get myself out of compromising situations, which helped me later on. I was a family-oriented kid, but that doesn't mean that my teenage years was a breeze. Once I got to high school, I started getting into trouble. I was a nice girl, but I loved street folks. I always wanted to hang with them because I thought they were so cool and real. I stole clothes from Macy's and from Rich's, which I learned from my friend from New York. If you heisted something from Rich's and it was under $50, you can return it for cash. You didn't need the receipt if it was under $50. At Macy's, for anything over $100, they'd send you a check in the mail if you returned it. My friends and I had this whole system worked out, and we never got caught. My mom didn't know, but she knew I was up to dicey stuff. She knew she raised me better than that. But if she told me not to do something, chances were that I still might try it, depending on how badly I wanted it. One weekend when I was 16, my mom went out of town, and my Aunt Velva was in charge of watching me. Before Velva left for work for the day, she said, "Tionne, do not drive the car. Your mom parked it in a certain way. She'll know if you moved it." But I was smarter than that. I took a piece of chalk and I marked around the wheel so I could put it back the same way. Me and my friend, Little Kim, not the famous rapper, got in the car. I backed it out of the driveway and we took off for the Greenbrier Mall to steal some clothes so I could look fly to dance at the skating rink on Sunday. My aunt wasn't going to be back until after 4 p.m., so I knew we had mad time to spare. Enough time to hit up Blimpie on the way home. I had it all figured out. 10 minutes at Blimpie, 10 minutes to drive home, 10 minutes for the car to cool down. Except the car wouldn't start. We were sitting in the Blimpie parking lot thinking, "Aw, junk." I begged everyone who came by for a jump start. Finally, with only 20 minutes to spare, some guy jumped the car and we leapt in and gunned it, heading back to my house. I went straight through a stoplight and this white guy zoomed and revved around the corner. I tapped the back of his car. Oh no! Even though it was his fault for pulling in front of me, I took off. I just kept going, and he started chasing us. "You fucking niggers," he shouted at us. "I'ma fucking kill you, you fucking niggers." Kim and I started crying. "Oh my God," I screamed. "He's racist. He's gonna kill us." I knew it was serious once he used the N-word since we were in the South, where the KKK dwell. I kept my foot on the gas, careening down the road. I turned and sped, trying to figure out the way back to my house, tears pouring down my face. I was lost and so afraid. I flew through a cul-de-sac and somehow got my bearings. The guy chasing us got stuck, and we lost him around the corner. With minutes to spare, I pulled the car back into the driveway, lining it up with the chalk lines. Kim and I frantically tried to rub the chalk lines off the pavement as we straightened our clothes and wiped away our tears. By the time my aunt came home, shortly after, Kim and I were sitting in the living room pretending nothing happened. We were calm by then. "Tionne," my Aunt Velva said, "I know you stole the car. The hood is hot." My heart sank. After all that, I still got caught? "Please don't tell my mama," I begged. I got away with it, barely. But it was a good thing that guy never figured out who hid his car or followed us home. My Aunt Velva didn't tell my mama. She knew there'd be hell to pay if she told. And thankfully, there were no dents as evidence. During my teens, I had a boyfriend for several years. I don't need to reveal his name, so let's just call him Calvin. He was one of those street people I loved hanging out with. I lost my virginity to him, and we stayed together a long time. He got me into some bad things. When I was 17, he got me messed up in this check scam. I had a checking account, so one day he asked me to cash a check for him. It was for a few $1,000s. Not that much. I didn't think anything of it. What I didn't know was that the checks had been stolen from a major corporation in another state. His buddy stole hundreds of thousands of dollars by writing big checks and cashing them. Calvin wrote only a couple of the checks, but he was affiliated with this other guy. At the time, my mom was working for UPS. She made good money, and we had big screen TVs and nice furniture. She worked really hard to give my brother and me a nice home. A few days later, after I cashed the check for Calvin, I came home and the phone rang. It was one of the neighbors. "We see people hanging in the trees looking at your house," he said. "Look outside." What? Suddenly, everything went into high gear. It was like an action movie. Guys from the FBI kicked in the door and bust through the windows. They were everywhere. They started to trash the house and dump drawers out. I had no idea what they were looking for. The FBI guys had guns and were yelling, "Get on the ground!" My mom complied and looked at me. If looks could kill, that one would have. I would be dead. I got on the floor too. My brother wasn't home. He was at his grandmother's house. So it was just me and my furious mother trying to figure out why the FBI was here. And there was no reason why the FBI would show up at the house of an honest working woman unless her crazy-ass daughter, who'd been hanging with the wrong people, had done something bad. The FBI questioned my mom for a long time. "How did you afford to buy this TV?" they asked. They acted like she was a criminal when all along it was me who had messed up. Ultimately, though, it came out why they were there. It was the checks. I got questioned next. "I did it as a favor," I explained. "I gave them the money and I didn't think anything of it." That was true. I didn't keep a dime. The FBI made me go to the bank and write a confession letter explaining that I had nothing to do with it. I was facing years in jail if they convicted me for this. I could have been in really big trouble. They ended up arresting the guy who was leading the charge on the check scam, and they let me go. They decided I wasn't lying, which I wasn't, and that I had nothing to do with it, which I didn't. The guy got sent back to North Carolina or wherever he was from to face the charges. I still have my confession letter somewhere. It's hilarious to read now. Calvin and I stayed together for a while, although our relationship was really toxic. He went to jail later for something he didn't do, which seems ironic. I got put on punishment by my mama, but it was nothing major because I knew how bad I'd screwed up. My mom simply said, "I don't want to talk to you right now because I might hurt you." She worked so hard for everything she had. I felt terrible. Some people do this kind of stuff while on drugs or while drunk, but I was of sound mind. I worked hard to get myself in order after that. I wanted to be the sort of daughter my mama was proud of. The things you learn from your parents when you're growing up are crucial. They lead by example. As I arrived at the end of high school, my path was ready to reveal itself. The stage was calling me. Even though I didn't have the term for it yet, things were really MTV. Chapter 3. The TLC Tip. In the late 80s, all the kids hung out at a roller rink called Jelly Bean. It was in Ben Hill, a neighborhood in southwestern Atlanta that at the time was considered the hood. Cars rolled up into the Jelly Bean parking lot in squads. There was the Jetta crew, the Hyundai crew, the Jeep crew. Those cars were all that and then some. Every single one painted up, fancy rims stuck on the wheels, and they looked cool, even if they really weren't. Later, you'd get the rich kids in their Porsches pulling in, sliding in between the cheap cars and the motorcycle crew, and after them. It was the place to be. It cost $3 to get inside, and I'd spent all week collecting $3, begging quarters off of people, and hoarding the change. It felt like the end of the world if my mom said I couldn't go. I'd beg her to let me, whining and pleading like it was either this or death. If I misbehaved, my punishment was that I wasn't allowed to go to Jelly Bean. "You're tripping," I mumbled at my mama. "Why you gotta do that to me?" But most weeks I spent with my friend Sabrina, and we'd dress up like our lives depended on it. Baggy jeans, colorful t-shirts, oversized sweatshirts, cool sneakers. I didn't have much money to buy new clothes, so she taught me how to shoplift. I stole whatever items I couldn't afford so I could have the latest trends. I had to look fresh. My hair had to look hella good. And I spent all week, every week, planning my outfit. It was a big deal to me. Sabrina and I got there any way we could, usually hitching rides. We went almost every Sunday night for 3 years during high school. Inside Jelly Bean were guys with their trendy Gumby haircuts, like Bobby Brown and Don't Be Cruel, and girls in wildly bright clothes. There were drug dealers who had these ridiculously big phones inside even bigger phone cases, sauntering around the rink, trying to impress everybody. Every week, it was a fashion show, a talent show, and a party all at the same time. Dallas Austin, who later ended up being TLC's main producer and the father of Chilli's Child, went there, and so did the guys from Outkast, although I didn't know them then. I knew Dallas and used to talk to him on the phone long before I ever realized we'd work together. Some went to Jelly Bean to hang out and to be seen, but others, like me, came to dance. Every Sunday night, some of the guys would gather on the dance floor, which was actually just the roller rink all cleared off, to battle. The room was packed, half the crowd cheering and half the crowd dancing across the floor. It was a real mob scene. Everybody in, everybody grooving to the music and trying to one-up one another. It was only the guys who battled, but by the time I was a senior in high school, I would become famous around town for my moves. I was the only girl they let in their dance crew. I danced the first time I ever went there, people sweating all over the place, and I'd battled those dudes every single week. I had all the popular moves, skipping, transforming, yeeking. When you were yeeking, a style of dance in Atlanta, You'd shout, "Yeek," as you did it. The battles were done with crews, but usually you faced off with someone solo in the center of the floor. You'd get in there, show your stuff, and the crowd would scream. Whoever got the loudest shouts was declared the winner, and you bet I won most of the battles I battled. Ha! Dancing was the thing I was best at back then. School, not so much. I kept getting kicked out. And even though I was supposed to graduate from high school in 1988, I ended up being held back to the class of '89. I got kicked out of 4 high schools, much to my mama's dismay. She had to take me down to the Board of Education's office and convince them to find a school that would accept me. By the time she got me into one, I only had to go to the first 12 weeks of the year and then just wait for graduation to roll around. I took my graduation photos downtown all by myself because I'd messed up and hadn't been able to complete school with all my peers. I'd been kicked out of too many schools and actually the whole school district, so I had to do the photos by myself. It seemed fitting that I'd have to get my pictures done solo, but I'd finished school. That's what mattered. It mattered to me, and more important, to my mama, who sat in the crowd while hundreds of kids got their diplomas before they arrived at the name Watkins.
This is the end of the CD. The audiobook continues on the next CD.